Good evening, Passagio attendees. If you wouldn't mind, people, just giving us a little message down the right-hand side of your screen, just to let us know that you are well and alive.
It's a good start.
So we know you can hear us. Just type it. You can type anything from, profanities to compliments about our hair and, facial clippings, if you like.
Keith.
Because so far I can see we have Carol, Diana, John, Anastasia as well, and me and Steve, or Steve and I if you use proper English.
Probably worth mentioning at this moment that we'll probably talk very slow and we'll be toing and froing really slowly, because otherwise if we talk over each other there's chaos.
As we are currently in separate locations, do we have any messages? We have a hi. We have a hi from Lynn. So we'll just give it a couple more moments, and then we're going to get into the juicy subjects of Passagio, which I might say is very exciting. Steve? Yes, okay. So I think with our bunch we have in here, 6 people, we should probably, should we get going, Steve?
Yeah, let's do it. We've got 30 minutes.
30 minutes. So let's let it roll off. So if I can just start with a quick agenda, people, is that what we're going to do is we're going to chat to you briefly about the Passagio and what even it is in simple terms. Steve's going to talk to you about that briefly. Then we're going to move on into, what supports that, the different parts of the voice that need to be discovered before you can start approaching something like the Passagio, or the bridge, as we're probably going to call it regularly. Then we can talk about the vocal cords themselves and their action as you go through the range and through the bridge. We're going to talk about how vowels and resonance support that. And then we're going to get into things that you can use that help you to develop the Passagio, get more of a sense of it, and maybe for some of you exercises that might, well, tune it in a little stronger. But at any time you want, people, you can leave a question in the right-hand bar. Any question is relevant. The Passagio is a wild and weird place where nothing is stupid, so don't feel silly by asking certain questions. Put them up. We will do our best to answer them. We have one already, which is cool, so we can talk to you guys about that. And that's how it's going to go on this lovely Sunday night. So, I hope you've got a cup of tea and a cat on your lap, so we can get started with this one. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Giles to the floor, who's going to talk to you about what is the Passagio, essentially.
Welcome. Just to check, you do have a cat on your lap, don't you, Chris?
He's just run off, but yeah, if he comes back, I'm just going to swing him in front of the screen.
Okay, let's get on with it. So, the Passagio, I think we all know exactly. We've all had a play around in that part of our voice. Some of us will know what it feels like. Some of us will know what it feels like to go wrong, when it feels good. It's sometimes called the blend. It's sometimes called probably the mix. It's probably sometimes called the break, flip. Lots of different names for this same thing, and that thing is highly complicated to describe in one sentence. So what I'll do is demonstrate to begin with exactly what it sounds like, or can sound like, Firstly, what can happen at this bridge section is as we ascend in pitch, we can often get to a point where we can go no higher. Would that sound okay, Chris?
It sounds brilliant. Yeah.
The second thing that can happen if we're ascending in pitch is flipping, almost yodeling into the top end. Pardon?
The cow? That sounds like a cow.
Ow. Okay, and thirdly, we can actually be quite organised in our bridge, and we can get this kind of full sound, which is for want of a better explanation at this point, a bit at the bottom and a bit at the top together, which is something like mum, 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 that kind of sound. So somebody once described it ages ago as there's two parts to the voice, and this is very basic, and don't run away and thinking this is the gospel, but there's a low end, oh, and there's a high end, ow, and if we add these two things together, we should have a beautiful sound. Now the point is that we know that this bridge exists. We know that it's on certain pitch. It starts around certain pitches in the voice. But essentially, what we need to always remember is that these two different, if they are different parts of the voice, are always working together. It's just in different proportions. So on from there, in a basic explanation of what happens anatomically, we've got synergy between muscles, and we've got synergy between that and some resonance, and these two things work in hand the whole time, which I'm already confused about what I'm saying, and that shows how difficult singing actually is when we consider we've got to get these muscles working in balance together, which are basically working within the vocal cord structure, and then the resulting resonance also has an effect back and forth. So I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk a little bit about the resonance and break that down to make it a little bit more understandable. Over to you, sir.
Okay, great. So the resonance kind of works where the vocal cords themselves, if you imagine they are sheets of muscle that join at the front of your neck, and they're inside the larynx, which is the Adam's apple, which is a big ball of cartilage. And when they shut and come together is when we sing. I'm really skipping past this quite quickly. But when they join, the airflow from the lungs vibrates them by puffing through with little vibrations, which makes the vocal cords kind of slap together like this, and that creates this sound wave, or an air disturbance, which is a sound wave, up into the throat and the mouth. And the throat and the mouth are what are called the resonators, and they do give energy to that sound wave. It's the same as an acoustic guitar, which I have in the corner, which the strings can be like the vocal cords vibrating, creating the air disturbance, but the body of the guitar itself is what provides the volume and the tone and the sound and the color of it. And without that body, you don't get much noise from the strings, hence why when you twang an electric guitar, without it being plugged in, you don't really hear much but this tiny little tinny sound. So that's what we're talking in terms of resonance, and the way the Passagio works is at that very moment, resonance kind of changes, and things need to move around between parts of your vocal tract, which you will feel quite strongly at times, which can be very off-putting, but also we need to shape our mouth and our throat to provide a very good amplification tool for the resonance. And if we don't amplify that resonance in the right way with our mouth shapes, then we lose power, we lose the support of the system, and things tend to fall over, and then we strain or crack or something like that. But that is all supporting what happens at the vocal cord level, because they need to actually coordinate themselves in another way. So Steve's going to talk to you about the vocal cords themselves and how they interact from the bottom of the range to the top.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, really. This what we have to do as singers to create sound to begin with, but then to organize it well enough to create these individual pitches, sound on these pitches in a way that we want it to sound like. It's ridiculous, really, the complexity of all of this. Especially when you consider what Chris has spoke about, the resonance and all those different changes with this tract. and how we shape the throat and the mouth, they're going to have a massive effect. As you said, the source where the chords come together, we've also got this situation where there's two sets of muscles working, or a set of muscles working. We've got the thyroarytenoid that runs along the length of the vocal cords, and we've got the cricothyroid, which almost, to keep it simple, is creating the tension, especially as we ascend higher. Now, these two, let's not beat around the bush here. These two muscles are continually working together in balance. It's just that at certain points in the voice, one will be, I guess, slightly more activated than the other. So, if there's any kind of school of thought out there which says that one shuts off and then the other one starts as we get above the bridge, it just doesn't happen that way. At least, it hasn't been studied to show that. So we need to be clear of that. So it's really important that we balance these muscles and the resonance together. What we say, and we'll go on to the fixes in a second, but if you consider that this thyroarytenoid is dominant in the lower pitches, then encouraging that to happen, especially if we are somebody who's got a background without much chest voice or without much experience in the lower notes, we're going to want to develop that coordination using certain exercises, sounds, whatever. But we're going to want to get those muscles activated. Just to give an example, if we are somebody that's had a background in without much experience in chest voice, we haven't got the bottom end in, and if we haven't got the bottom end in, or equally if we haven't got the top end sorted out before we try and address the bridge, then inexperience is going to be a lot more difficult, because it's almost like saying we have to isolate the two areas first, the bottom and the top, and then we can start to address balancing them together. As I say, it's almost like saying that, but that's a very simple way of saying it. The male bridge will begin around the E flat 4, and the female bridge will begin around the A flat 4. These are very general pitches, and dependent on where we're starting at, they're really going to differ. For example, if we're somebody that likes to sing in chest voice all our life, then potentially we're going to be starting that bridge a little lower, and vice versa for the top. I hope that makes sense. I did rush through that quite quickly, but any questions, please stick them down. I know we've got a couple coming already. Chris, I'm going to hand over to you for these. We've got any questions here?
Yeah, we have. We can address John in a second, actually, because once we've spoken about the vocal cord and the resonance together, then it might make John's question kind of more clear to people who are listening. But so as Steve said, yes, we have the vocal cords. They are kind of stretching along for tension to create a higher pitch. And as those pitches go up, there is some interaction with the resonators. So the spaces of the throat and the mouth are giving energy to that sound. And we need to shape them in just the right way in order to pass over from the bottom voice to the top voice with no crack. And the way we do that is shapes are kind of strange. Shapes resonate sound waves in certain ways. And so what we have to do is, in the bottom part of our voice, if you guys all put your hands on the top of your chest and make a very deep sound, you will feel the resonance of your throat cavity travel down into your chest, and you'll feel the vibrations, much like in speech. But if you hold there still and go, woo, and do a high-pitched sound, typically you'll feel no vibrations here, because the mouth cavity has now taken over as being the main resonator for the voice. And those two resonators interact with each other in a massive way at the Passagio. And if we don't support that process by shaping our mouth and our throat in such a way that they are able to hand over resonance from one to the other without any audible sound or change, if we can't do that, then we'll experience some change at the Passagio. That might not even be as bad as a crack or a flip, but it might actually be a tone that gets very thin, or it might actually be a tone that gets too thick. So we have to look at certain vowel shapes Vowels are the controller for shaping the mouth and throat to sing well, and they are what holds all the energy for our voice. So we use vowels to adjust that change. And I hope that made sense. So, do you want me to read out John's question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So John has said, what confuses me is that, in brackets, after following 2 different vocal training methods, we'd love to know what they are, John, by the way, as well, if you want to pop them out. One says there is a mixed voice. The other says there is no such thing in reality, namely that it is an illusion, and as such the head voice is the head voice, and it is the ability to make that resonant that counts.
Yeah.
So, do you want to start us off with that, Steve?
Yeah, I'll kick up with a cracking question, John. Cracking question, and one that comes up a lot. I just want to outline to begin with, and maybe you want to go on a little more depth afterwards, Chris, but I want to say that this mixed voice, the reason why I was almost quite flippant at the start of this and in the article about it's called this, it's called that, it's because over the years things have been given names. It's even as far as chest voice and head voice, to be honest with you. Things have been given names based on feelings, and to be honest with you, they don't really have. They can be quite confusing in terms of the voice and the way it works. So with this mixed voice, it's completely understandable in a way that it's called mixed voice, because we get this illusion of, as you say, of this mixture of resonance in the it's almost stronger at the Passagio, and that's maybe why we feel this. Oh, I can't even explain this feeling, but someone's called it mixed before, so I call it mix. I think the best way to move on, especially if we are a little bit confused about what's what here, is to say that every pitch has got its own situation, meaning that it's got its own chord coordination, and therefore it's got its own resonance situation, and all of this have to work together. When we hit the bridge, when we hit those bridge notes, it just gets a little bit trickier, and things get a little bit more energetic and a bit exciting, and that really is the only difference. Would you agree, Chris?
Yes, I mean, I totally agree with you. There's so many ways of calling it mixed, though, too. You know, I can so understand how it gets confusing. But yeah, every pitch has its own setting. You're damn right, and we have to move with that and morph with that. And I think, yeah, for the sake of making it easier to explain, at times people have categorized chest and head. But inevitably, when singers like John and anybody who gets far down the line with vocal technique, chest and head voice and mix obviously bring out confusion, because those terms don't really answer the questions that advanced singers have. And you know, we can look at the chest voice. The chest voice, you know, in one sense is the resonance felt mostly in the throat. The head voice is the resonance felt mostly in the mouth and felt mostly in the head. But also, you know, if you're talking to an ENT surgeon or an SL or speech language therapist, they would talk about that as, you know, thick vocal cord with the thyroretinoid muscle engaged. I know, yawn. And head voice, you know, it's stretched long where only the edge of the vocal cord is vibrating, and also people call that chest and head voice as well. But in truth, I think there's a teacher called Brian LeChuck who's in Canada, and he's a great guy, and he makes a really good point actually in his articles that there kind of is no chest and head. Mix is kind of happening all of the time, but you can change the proportion of that mix from the point of how you use your muscles in your voice and how you shape your vowels on top of it. It's not an illusion per se, but mixed voice is happening almost from 5 notes from the bottom of your range. Mixed voice and a mixing of 2 parts of your voice are occurring at all times. And when someone is appeared to be mixing, as opposed to belting, for instance. Those two things could still be considered a mix, but belting is more chest dominant mix, whereas what people see as mixed voice is actually a split between the two, where the tension in two muscles are actually starting to balance out more towards the one that gets you towards your head voice. And then you can go even lighter in that mix where it sounds like head. An audible example of that is if you take ooh, which most people would call head, and that note is probably around about the Passagio. It's probably like a G. Ooh. But if you increase some muscular tension in the vocal cord by choice, ooh, you can turn it into what sounds like a mix. And that is just interaction between two muscles. But in truth, there was mix all over that sound. It's just the proportions of it. So I can so see. And in a half an hour webinar, it's very hard to get a full resolution to that question, John. But you can rest assured that that mix is a very, very fluffy term. And as Steve said, actually every pitch has its own setting. And in fact, our voice probably is one voice that is capable of many different colors, which people have put into categories which we should probably ignore at times.
Yeah, and also just saying there that you mentioned there, John, about the different methods and which one you're following and who says what, and it's just tricky because the science is always changing. Therefore, and certain schools will take a little longer to catch up than others, and then as a singers we have to then go, well, they said, and I'm following them, and that's the information they gave me, and so it's, who do I choose the whole time? So I think you exploring this is great, and that's the best way to go about it, really. But I would just say as well, just try not to get too set on a certain pedagogy or strict school of thought, because as I say, it's always changing. And hopefully just try and get as many different opinions as possible.
Yeah, that's true. And he does make a point at the end that to make head voice resonant is what counts, and that's kind of irrelevant, in terms of what goes on in the vocal cord. You can make your head voice. I mean, soprano singers, classical singers do it all the time. They make their head voice really loud. And that most people need to think like they need to be using chest to be loud, but this is where the vowel comes in, because the vowel itself is the booster for the sound wave. So the vocal cords themselves might not be working very hard. They might be just kind of light and thin and in this kind of head voice sort of position. But if that singer is able to shape their vocal tract in such a way that boosts that sound wave to the max, then they're able to have a head voice sound that is perceived with loudness, and that is the responsibility of the vowel, separate to the vocal cords. So I hope that's like a little bit clearer, John. But we should get into some ways of helping to ascend into the Passagio. Have you got some ideas, Steve?
Yeah. So we'll be quite quick with this. We've only got a few minutes, and please, any more questions, send them in. The addressing the bridge really does start on diagnosing where we're at as a singer. It's one of those. So if we are a singer who is more chest dominated, somebody that is activating that TA, and is heavy, then the exercise would differ to somebody who isn't as heavy and has had more experience singing in head voice. If we're somebody that is strong in chest voice and in the low notes and finds it hard getting into the bridge, a common result of that would be firstly, we're going to want to explore head voice using sounds that are going to get us there. Normally the more closed vowels, the oohs and the e's. Ooh-wee! Maybe sticking a soft consonant on the front of those, or a glide. Ooh-wee! Fee-foo! Any of those, which over time, it's not going to happen overnight, but over time we'll start to develop the head voice. it's really, I can't stress enough that it's about making sure we've got the other side of the bridge, the other side of the journey. I think Chris mentioned about the destination, the passage of the destination. We start one place, we end up another. We need that other side there first before we can kind of start to balance them out. How can you balance with only one thing? So head voice, woo, wee, woo, woo, and then and just hang on up there. If we are more head voice dominated, more CT dominated, more fluffy and light and loving life up the top, then we're going to want to get into the bottom there using more wider vowels. Ah, ah, using harder consonants. Ga, ga, ba, those kind of things, and just walking up. Ga, 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 ga. Those kind of scales as well. So start at the bottom, work up. Just live in the low voice a little bit longer. Then once we've got both of those sides developed, you'll already start to feel that this middle section is kind of starting to balance out a tiny bit. But then we can get a little bit more direct with the exercises in those middle notes. And what would they be, Chris?
I mean, that is a wide subject. People tend to cycle through a whole bunch of wacky vowels and sounds to find out what they need to use to develop that Passagio, but some ones that very experienced singers use are the consonant W followed by an open vowel. So stuff like where, wah, way, 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 kind of getting in there. That's usually for the singers who are able to control their voice a little more. For singers who are not able to control their voice as much as that, quite often what we need to take is we need to take a trip through the bridge using one of the extreme sounds, like the very, very dumb sound or the very, very bright sound. And those sounds essentially move parts of your throat around to try and break the cycle of straining that can happen when people get in there. Because straining is often a habit that's been ingrained over attempting high notes for such a long time. So if we can break that cycle and allow things to switch over to the head voice in a more smooth fashion, then that's what we need to do. So we can get into that bridge area using things like gug and woof and buh. So goo goo or boo 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 boo, something like that. Woof 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 woof. If we're looking on the bright side of things, we're looking at things like nay, 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 nay. Something really bright to get yourself in there. Keep working in that area. I'm a big fan of taking really bright sounds and putting them on wah from the middle of the bridge down. So wah, wah, stuff like that. That bright sound tends to give you that impression of a little bit more chest feeling and sound, especially if you're a little bit weaker in that bridge. If you're a bit of a yeller, you might find that actually the dumber stuff works a little better. But really the end game is to not have to use one of those sounds and mess around with vowels and consonant combinations to get yourself in that bridge. But typically for that bridge, compared to other parts of the range, the vowels need to be a little bit more closed on the mouth while you're in the middle of that bridge sustaining. When you come under the bridge, like vowels can tend to be quite wide and quite inaccurate. And when you're up above the bridge, things are different then. The mouth needs to open but in different ways, but usually in the middle we need to just keep things a little bit more controlled and keep everything behind the lips just feeling relaxed and stable and in place. So that's what we're looking at in terms of, you know, ways of trying to get into that bridge without cracking. John's posed quite a quick question there on Robert Lunte, who I think he's saying he developed the 4 pillars of singing method, is of the opinion that speech-based singing is out of date. And if I think, John, you might be relating to speech level singing as a method, and I would agree with you. that speech level singing and the way it certainly thought when I was part of it is a little bit out of date, and there are much better ways of understanding and implementing voice training than speech level singing addressed. But it did help a lot of people, I have to say that. Despite all that, it helped a lot of people. And speech level singing, by the way, is not the same as Vocalize You. Vocalize You is just a network of teachers who teach things that are true and that are based on fact and science and is open-minded, which is not the things that speech level was.
So, and just to go on from there, what you said before that, Chris, I just want to say we immediately jump into scales and sounds to fix the bridge, and I often get a lot of people say, you know, why do I have to do scales? What is it about the sounds? If you think about it, all we're doing when we say ah or up, when we say to access head voice, woo, and in the bridge, as Chris said, wah wah, all that kind of stuff, we are just pushing and pulling the different shapes around in our mouth and in our throat, in different levels of chord closure, and just reorganizing that stuff continually. And that's based on experience, it's based on some science on what works in the different areas, and so that's why certain sounds are used in the different parts of the voice. So this is why we jump straight into those sounds and go, well, bash them in for a few months, make these different coordinations in the low part, the high part, and then in the middle, and then these sounds will start to adapt over time, and then your voice will almost start to adapt into a situation that is more conducive to mix or blend or middle voice,
or just inverted commas, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, Steve's right. It's muscle memory. Like if you're having real trouble singing songs in that area, you usually have to get off the songs and onto something a bit more stable. So Steve's totally right. But when you get into songs, without being able to go into too much here, you might have to. Certainly on the nakedvocalist.com, there is a blog post about vowel substitution on our website, which does give you some hints as to sort of the vowel changes you can make to lyrics to hold you in place on those high notes. Because in song we need to start adjusting vowels to facilitate this resonance change, and we don't have time to go into that today. But if you were to look on the nakedvocalist.com on the blog section and find vowel substitution, then you would see some advice backed up by video, which will show you how you actually implement some of this in song. But much like the scales, if we use the dumb sound or the funny sound, as weird as it sounds, you can apply those sounds directly to lyrics, and you might be able to sing the songs like we used to sing, Heard It Through the Grapevine, and for about 2 years I had to be like, I know a man is supposed to cry. I had to sing it like Michael McDonald for about 2 years just to get my larynx to settle down. And now it's way more interchangeable, but it didn't mess with the style too much. I got away with it on stage. Everyone seemed to like it anyway, and that was a way of me actually, you know, trying to solve an issue whilst on stage, which saved me a lot of time and effort outside of the stage. So yeah, solving this in song, I have to say, is probably the holy grail and what the whole world is struggling with in terms of singing.
Yeah, because if you think about it, exercises are relatively easy. We're given one sound to do over and over again. So when we go to song, it's a melee of different obstacles that are going to screw us up. And the reason why Chris immediately jumped for the or the is because one of those is likely to do something that's going to help us out in that situation. That's all it is. Again, it's just something that is possibly going to help in that situation, and again, through experience, they do work. The vowels that are offered on the post on the Naked Vocalist website are, again, they are offered because we know what is likely to happen in the bridge, for example, in the middle of the bridge, one thing that can happen is on a certain lyric, if it was what's Whitney Houston, Close the Door. I have nothing.
Yeah.
Don't make me close, why am I? Don't make me close. It's likely in the right key for a lady for her to sing the vowels like that. It just happens. That's what the voice is likely to do because of the way the human body's built. It just happens. It may not happen every time. Different people, different frogs. But don't make me close. What we say, we offer up a don't make me close one. We say as opposed to cla, which has come out before. They're just variations. So what we say is whether it's vowel, whether it's that sound, whether it's that sound, have a play around in that part of your voice and see if any of it makes any difference to you individually. And if it does, do it lots, and the voice will hold on to it.
Yeah. So if you have any more questions before we wrap it up, please do give us a shout on the chat. But thanks to John for chucking in his questions. We would like to draw your guys' attention to the iSing magazine, who have hosted this webinar. They are just phenomenal in the content that they provide. Obviously, we provide content for them and have a great deal of fun writing articles, but you can find so much information on that magazine. So please do go and visit it's iSing Mag, isingmag.com, isingmag.com, and hook up with the magazine, download it, read it. So much in there, from diet to technique to even just taste and good music and stuff. But we are the Naked Vocalists. I'm Chris, that is Steve, and you can find us at thenakedvocalist.com, where we have a podcast where we do a whole bunch of different subjects about singing, technique. We have special guests, and you can find us on Facebook as well, facebook.com/TNV questions. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the webinar. Thanks for attending on a Sunday night. No doubt we'll see some of you or hear from you in the future. Please do get in touch if we can help with anything at all. But thanks to iSing for putting on the webinar, and thanks, Steve, for your time tonight.
Well, thank you, Chris. I just want to say thank you for everyone for coming, and for, like you say, on a Sunday night when people should be eating roast dinners.
Let me just
spend time with us. I really appreciate it. It's great. Any questions in the future, please send them through to us or iSing Magazine, either or, and we're just here to help. There's a cat.
See?
It's about to be swung by its arms, I'm sure.
He was over there getting some free information on Passagio. When you drew. Yeah, there he is.
Probably time to go now. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your messages as well there. Pleased to have helped.
Bye.
See you later.